This is the Patrick Alexander Podcast. Welcome to your upgrade. It's good to have you with me today again on the Patrick Alexander Podcast. So this podcast is about personal responsibility. The guests on this podcast stopped outsourcing their health, they stopped outsourcing their bodies and their life, and they started taking responsibility for how they live. Today, I am joined by Joe Dalle Vedove. I just heard from Joe before we recorded that that's the way I'm pronouncing it correctly. Sounds very Italian to me. Joe has been a coach for over 4 decades. Now, for most of that time, he worked with an assistant that he trusted and he didn't question. But then something shifted. Not a crisis, not a breakdown, but just a question that wouldn't want to go away. Joe followed that question far enough that lived experience began to contradict long-held belief. And now he's been a carnivore for 8 years. More importantly, he's someone who allowed reality to override certainty. Now, this is not a conversation about diet trends, but it's a conversation about what happens when staying the same is no longer honest. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for having me. I feel grateful and blessed to be here talking to you about basically the carnivore lifestyle. So this is awesome.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Before we begin to talk about what it's like for you to be here today.
Well, it's awesome. As you mentioned, I found carnivore 8 years ago. I found it when I was 49 years old. I'm 57 now. And I tell people all the time, kind of in this lifestyle, I wish I found it when I was 19, when I was 29. What a difference, my entire adult life would have been, kind of living a carnivore lifestyle compared to a macro-based lifestyle, which I was doing before. So, it really has, it's amazing how it's really, changed my life in so many different ways, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. And, and if you would have told me that 8.5 years ago when I kind of started, I would have told you you're crazy, right? Because I believed that what I was doing was healthy, what I believed was great, and it was the way to do it, right? So yeah, just like my goal is in this lifestyle now is to let people understand and know, educate and empower and inspire them to basically, live. I know we say it and people kind of joke, but the proper human diet, the way we should be eating, right? Because,
Yeah.
I'm just not surviving. And that's what people always ask, like I'm thriving. I've never thrived. I didn't even know what that was until I basically got into carnivore, which is it's different. It's everything. It's what we call the anti-nutrition, right? It's the anti-lifestyle. Everything we're taught, it was literally the opposite.
So okay, take me back to the time before you found carnivore. What
Yeah,
was, because you said it made so many changes in your life, and I totally
yeah.
agree with that. And everybody I speak to who started carnivore says the same. And I'd like to hear from you personally. What was your life at a personal level back in the day before you discovered carnivore?
Well, yeah. So we have this joke as former fat people. Once a fatty, always a fatty. Like I was 308 pounds. I was 14 years old. And I didn't want to go into high school fat because I wanted a girlfriend. So, I went the traditional route. I went and joined the gym. And ironically enough, I couldn't join the gym because being Italian, being European, you were celebrated when you ate, right? You were celebrated when you had some meat on your bones, right? And, my parents believed there was nothing wrong with me and they wouldn't pay for me to go to a gym. Uh, Meanwhile, I was a severely, we wouldn't even call obese, like, overweight, like fat, like 14 years old, 5'6", basically 5'7", 308 pounds. I was as wide as tall. Okay. And, and I went down to the local gym and I was honest with the owner. I said, I don't have any money. I go, but if we can make a deal, I'll come here every day after school, work for you if you let me work out for free. And that's kind of the long and short story. Went there, we talked for 45 minutes. We're still friends to this day. We made a deal. I would come 5 days a week. I would clean the washrooms, clean the floors, clean the mirrors. If I did a good job, he let me work out. Right. And that's kind of how my journey started. And because it was a bodybuilding gym, I met bodybuilders, right? Gym bros. And, their whole thing was carbs, fats, proteins, balancing them out. So that's kind of what I learned. And I was successful. You know what? I lost basically 100 pounds in a year. I went from 308 to 208, right? And it was mainly through nutrition and exercise. But the ironic thing is, even though I learned that stuff and I was working out, if we fast forwarded a bit, my entire teenage and adult life, I struggled with nutrition, right? I struggled with my weight, struggled with my health. And the reality is, you know, uh, all these things I was eating that I was told I was healthy, then, years later going to school and being educated, taught was healthy, was really not. Right. So I was just going through existing, thinking everything's normal, thinking being bloated is normal, think of being tired is normal, think of living on literally, when you look at it, I was literally living on stimulants. I was living on sugar. I was living on caffeine simply because, I wasn't getting the proper nutrition I needed. Like we're told, carbs, you need the carbohydrates for energy. Well, I was living a classic bodybuilding lifestyle. I would do a cut, for 4 months a year. So I'd stay leaner. For me, a cut was around 3,500 calories, still eating around 400 grams of carbs a day. And then a bulk was around 6,000 calories, eating 800 grams of carbs a day. But you know, my energy was horrible. I was, coffees 3 or 4 times a day, energy drinks, pre-workouts, right? Just to get through my day. And it never occurs to you that shouldn't happen. That's not normal. We're just basically taught, yeah, that's normal, right? And, going through those periods, I always found it was ironic. I'm eating all this food, you know, but I'm always hungry. My appetite's through the roof. My cravings are brutal. I end up binging, right? And, struggling with my weight. Prior to carnivore, I never maintained my weight for more than 3 months, right? I would be good for 2 or 3 months. And then you just, like everyone else, just off the rails, right? And, I really didn't learn until a little later that, I was addicted to sugar. I was addicted to carbs. I had food dependencies, food disorders, because we really didn't know back then what those things were. Right. And in all honesty, I probably lived until I got into my mid 30s until I actually realized those are the things I had based on my habits, right? But
Yeah.
we're told it's normal. We're told it's okay. I was just, I had a thought the other day, because I was at a friend's house and they're eating, their salad, and the one person goes, "Oh, I'm so bloated," and, and you know, I just. I just remember my mother being Italian, telling us, Italian broccoli is rapini, right? And, we're Italian, lots of garlic, lots of olive oil, rapini, and I just remember my mom telling me when I was younger, "Oh, you're going to have rapini. Don't worry, you're going to get a little bloated, a little gas. That's normal." And it's not. Or we are
Yeah.
just told that's normal, right? And, you know, so like just if you take that and magnify it by 100, literally that was my life. And then when I found carnivore, it was, first I thought it was nuts. I thought it was crazy, right? And and carnivore, what people don't realize, carnivore is not really new. It's been around forever, like literally since the dawn of time. Now, when we do research, it was how we literally went from form of a primate to a form of the first human was through meats and fats, and we literally ate meats and fats and bone marrow for a million years before foraging and utilizing carbohydrates. But you know we used to call it the no carb diet, and we never used to do it for a lifestyle, but we would do it, when people would compete, they would transition a couple months, go all fat, all protein, get super lean. And then you would add carbohydrates back in to fill the cells with water, and yeah, you look awesome on stage, right? So
Hold on,
so
that's interesting. So the
yeah,
bodybuilders actually do that in preparation.
yeah, they do a
So
form of
that,
it, but we just call it the no carb, right?
but
Because
then
that's
that
why
makes me
people would say, well,
wonder.
yeah,
Well, if it makes you feel as good as it makes us feel, which is like what everybody says, when you're a bodybuilder and you go on this no carb, you must also be feeling awesome. Why would you
You
stop
don't
doing
you
it?
because you don't because, if you look at the way they transition and they deplete their water and they're taking no salt, it's really just to lean out. They're not getting into fat adaptation. They're not getting the same hormonal responses because it's short term, right? Um, because there's a big difference between just the regular person, kind of eating the standard North American diet, which hopefully is going to change now based on the new food pyramid. But and then people who compete just because of the volume of food and what they're doing, right? Plus, they're taking, enhancements, right, which does change the way the body reacts as well. So you never
Mm,
get to that true, basically same, euphoric feeling of actually your body functioning and running hormonally great and metabolically great because they're already in a negative position based on what they're doing. And that's my theory on why it's never really happened. Um, because yeah, we know when people even just kind of guessing, so many people, millions of people basically, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, I feel like $1 million. I feel so great, right? But they're already in a position where the body's overstressed, right? Like if you actually look at, it's unfortunate as society, we look at these pictures of these people on the magazines, think they're healthy, and they'll tell you it's the most unhealthy thing you can do is deplete your body like that and then go back and deplete your body and go back and
yeah,
over stress your body through activity. And what a lot of them are telling you, they don't get that lean naturally. They're using diuretics, they're using, other drugs to basically secrete and push all the water out of their body so they get that look, right? And it's not normal. That's why you don't see, people just walking around at sub 10% body fat on the regular basis because that's not a normal position, right?
yeah.
Like the body needs a certain amount of fat hormonally, so it keeps it, right? The only reason it would lose more if it was basically, unhealthy or starving, right? So yeah,
Well,
so
and they're dying, but they're dying by great numbers. Like the past year, I saw some stat the other day. I can't even remember
yeah,
the number of bodybuilders that have passed in
well, that
2025. Is
yeah, and you know what? It's especially the long-term bodybuilders, guys that have been bodybuilding, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Well, if you think of the time they're completing, they're going through, depletion, refeeding, depletion, refeeding, depletion, refeeding. And I really I blame kind of social media as before, they weren't in front of a camera 24/7 where they can see them, right? So I think people now are trying to keep up the charade of looking super lean 24/7, where before, guys would basically, they would get, really fat, and they would bulk, right? I used to joke about bulking to all my macro brothers and sisters that it's just an excuse for you guys to eat donuts and eat pizza and get
yeah, yeah,
fat and eat whatever
exactly.
you want. Right? Because in a traditional bulk, they'll gain 25, 30 pounds. Then when they rip down and you see their overall difference, they gain 5 pounds of muscle. So,
Mm,
when you put on 30 pounds, but you only gain 5 pounds of muscle, that's 25 pounds of fat. Well, we would call that fatting, right?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and, people kinda in our space that have utilized carnivore meats and fats and being bodybuilders, they call it lean building, right? Where they stay around 4% in body fat. They never get super fat, and they don't overeat, and they just utilize protein and resistance training to develop muscle over a shorter
yeah,
period, right? Which is much healthier. Like, the body that's a lot of stress going up and down, up and down, up and down, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why, yeah, it's unfortunate, a lot of these individuals, are dying at a young age. And we're already as a society, I just got this update from this health page I follow, and over COVID in 4 years in Canada, the average age went from 74 to 66. So the average age of an adult now in the country of Canada is 66 years old. And 4 years ago, before COVID, it was 74, right?
wow,
And it was amazing to me, and I'm actually going to do a video on this soon. They blame stress, they blame COVID, They blame, being isolated. They literally blamed everything but what they were eating, right? And we basically know through COVID, people were basically just eating like garbage, getting no activity, no social interaction, you know, and I think that's the biggest thing they should look at. But, just like regular kind of misinformation, they don't want to blame food, right? They want to blame everything else but that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So for you,
it's very interesting.
for you back in the day, when you started talking
Yeah,
about you joined this gym, I really somehow I don't know, I got this image of me of like Sylvester Stallone in the Rocky movies. I don't even know if he actually did work in the gym, but it's kind of this feeling like you start working in the gym and eventually you become the world champion, right? But you started off cleaning
yeah,
the floors and scrubbing the mats. That's
yeah,
some image that came to my head. In that time, so let's say your late, probably teens or early 20s, was there
yeah.
anything that did feel stable or settled in your life when it comes to the way you were nourishing yourself?
Well, you know, so if I think back at it, which I have, I thought I was doing everything right. I was eating fruits, I was eating vegetables, whole carbs. We weren't eating a lot of fast food, right? Uh, back then we didn't talk about processed foods. We didn't talk about refined foods. They were there, but it wasn't such a big deal, right? It was more just, just eating more. And I remember them saying, eat just basically more whole foods, right? So a lot of rice, a lot of plain pasta, a lot of potatoes, right? A lot of broccoli. Like I used to joke to people, if I eat another chicken breast, broccoli, and rice, I'm going to shoot myself, right? Like I felt like a piece of chicken, broccoli, and rice, right? Because that's a staple, right? You eat
Yeah.
it, you eat it, you eat it, you eat it. Um, so you think you're doing all these things, but doing all these things, like one of the things I really recognized in a short period of time, I really didn't know what healthy was, right? Because I never had feelings of, not being sore, not aching, not having those little health issues, right? And, it's funny, we all go through it when we start carnivore. You end up having these epiphanies, whether it's 2 weeks in, 4 weeks in, 8 weeks in, 12 weeks in, you know, like, like, on day 20 of me eating nothing but meat and fat, uh, I was astonished because I used to basically work for a big fitness corporate club, and I was a regional manager. And on Wednesdays, we'd have these crazy days. We'd go 8 in the morning to 10 at night, right? And I just remember having my first meal and going through the day, and I just, one of my staff members said, "Well, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night." And I remember her shift ends at 8, and I'm like, "Hold on. I've just gone from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. I'm not hungry. I'm not miserable. I'm not, because that's the way I used to be. If I wasn't eating every 2 or 3 hours, I was miserable. I was moody. I was angry, right? And I just thought it's because I needed to eat. Well, no, it was my body coming off sugar because I was in that macro-based lifestyle of breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks in between, 6 meals a day, 6 smaller meals a day, better for your metabolic rate. You need to feed your body, you need to give yourself carbs. Um, and that was life changing for me, just that one moment. And I remember I went home, went to my wife, and I said, "Listen," I said, "I don't think I'm ever going to eat a carb again in my life." And she's like, "What?" I go, "I feel fantastic." I go, "This is crazy." I go, "I'm 3 weeks in. I feel amazing." And I go, "And today, I went the whole day. I'm not even hungry." I said, "Tomorrow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to eat my first meal. I'm going to go see how long I can go without being hungry." And she's like, "That's stupid. That's crazy." I said, "Well, I want to do it." Right. So I did it. Next day, ate my first meal, which was 8 eggs, 8 pieces of bacon, a few slices of Parmesan cheese. And I literally went 3 days before I was hungry. Right. And I'm like, "This is nuts." Right. And I said, "I've never once in my adult life cannot remember not being hungry, not wanting to eat, not thinking about food." We call it food noise, which is basically just a nice term for thinking of sugar and carbs, and you're addicted to carbs and sugar, right? Because it's not actually a term. We just use it so much now, people think it's a term, but it's not. And, that was the first kind of huge epiphany for me, is that my entire adult life, no matter how much I was eating, 4,000 calories, 6,000 calories, 3,500 calories, I was always hungry. Right. And it progressed to that. And it's just, and then I learned after the fact is because I was literally training my body to eat, training my body to be hungry. Right.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize that. But that's what I was taught. That's what I was told. And that's what I was doing, right? Where we should be opposite. Because I love, people always say, oh, rice is satiating, sweet potatoes are satiating, oatmeal satiating. And I'm like, no, it's filling. I go, you eat it to the point where you get uncomfortable, you're full, and then you stop. But 2 hours later, you want to eat again. I go, that's not satiation. Satiation is I eat my first meal and I have to eat my second meal and I'm still not hungry. I have to eat my third meal. I'm still not hungry, right? Like, it's amazing to me since today I'm 3,127 days carnivore, just over 8.5 years.
You count the
Um,
days
yeah, I do, right? And I do
like on
for a
the wall,
reason because
like in a prison.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the opposite. I'll say heaven, not a prison. And the reason I do it is because,
Yeah.
you know, so many people are super skeptical, right? Oh, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And I'm like, are you serious? It is the most sustainable life I've ever done. It's the most sustainable lifestyle and nutrition I've never done. I go, people's oppression of sustainability is variety, right? Well, things are only sustainable if you have variety. And I'm like, well, it's not. Because if you think of macro based diets where you're balancing your carbs, proteins, and fats, you're always struggling. You're always hungry. You're always miserable. Okay. You're always, you always break and binge. Okay. So, how's that sustainable? Right? It's just what we were taught to say and believe that, you know, we already know things like moderation. Well, moderation doesn't work. Balance doesn't work. Intuitive eating doesn't work. Right? You know, and those are usually people that need to drop 20, 30, 40 pounds that tell you got to eat everything in balance. You got to eat everything in moderation. Right? And we know that doesn't work. Right? If it worked, basically, why do people restart their diets, right? You know, January comes, World Fitness Month, January, people's resolutions. Do you know how many people every year have that resolution? They had it last year, the year before, the year before, the year before, and they're still doing the same thing. And that's one of the reasons why, we've seen such a growth in the last decade, right? Like it's night and day, right? We've gone from thousands to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Now, millions of people are finally starting to wake up, kind of look outside of the box, right? And that's what I always like to say to people is look outside of the box. And they're like, what does that mean? I go, well, we are doing everything they're saying. We are eating more often. We're eating less meats and fats because they told us it's unhealthy for us. We're eating more grains and more wheat, okay, and the fruits and vegetables because they say it's healthy for us. They told us reduce salt because salt's horrible for you, okay? You're doing everything they told us. And what's happening? We've never been more overweight. Let's just call it what it is. We've never been as fat in a society ever than right now. We've never been more unhealthier. We've never been more sick and we've never been on more medications, but we're doing everything they're telling us, right? With, you know, forget 2026, we're a month in, 2025, right? The technology we have, the science we have, the smart people we have, it literally should be the opposite. We should be the healthiest. We should be the fittest. We shouldn't be on medications. We should be literally living to 100 years old. And what's happening? We're dying at 66. People are sicker. We're told to go on more medications, more medications, more medications. We're saying, food's not the problem. You're the problem. I love that one, right? I
Yeah.
love when people say sugar's not the problem, ingredients aren't the problem, you're the problem. And I'm like, really? I go, that is so awesome. I go, because, yeah, like, why isn't it happening? Right? Like, and that's getting back to my point, like my entire adult life, never maintaining my weight for 3 months. When I did carnivore, I didn't even take it seriously, did it for a month, 20 days in, never going to eat a carb again you know, basically in 4.5 months, I dropped 64 pounds of fat, gained 12 pounds of muscle. Every health issue I had was literally reversed within 6 months. And it's the first time in my adult life I've literally maintained my weight for almost 8 years now without effort,
Yeah.
which is and and that's what I tell people, which is the incredible thing. Without effort, it takes so much effort when you're doing macros and balancing because we're really not balancing because, you know, and that's the thing. People are over consuming carbohydrates. And the funny thing is, too, people aren't eating whole foods. When we talk about them eating carbohydrates, most of it's coming from a box, it's processed, it's refined.
Yeah.
Like the stats are super crazy, right? Like, what do people throw at the most? Because it goes bad, fruits and vegetables. So they're buying them, but they're not eating, right? But the reality is, body really doesn't need them, right? Uh, so yeah, like
So
it's just
let me
crazy.
ask you
Like,
a question here, Joe.
yes, sir.
You've been working in the fitness industry, in the wellness industry for decades. You
Yeah,
started as a teenager, as you told me. You've gone through those motions yourself. You're just telling me, of course, that we've all been following the nutrition guidelines for decades, which, even aside from, of course, eating more processed foods, which we all
yeah.
know isn't good for us. I don't think we need to convince anybody there, but we've been following the food guidelines. We've gotten sicker and sicker over the decades. You working in this industry for those decades, was there never a point that you thought, like, there's something that just doesn't add up here?
Well, no, because you know what? You have tunnel vision, right? Like I used to tell people, I had tunnel vision. I was taught something, I believed something, everyone believed it, we did it, right? And then you get into this, and all of a sudden it goes like that. It's like a floodgate, it opens up, right? And, when you kind of believe something, that's what you look for, that's what you gravitate to, right? I really didn't, you know, I didn't really look into understanding more about nutrition, which is ironic because if we look at my background, I have a minor in nutrition, I have 4 nutrition certs, right? You know, and I think that's important for a lot of people to understand. People go through different avenues to get to where they want to be. One of the things that does separate me is, yeah, this is the only job I've done since I was literally 14 years old. I've been in the fitness, nutrition, health industry, right? Because, health, fitness, nutrition changed my life and also inspired for it. That's all I ever wanted to do. Right. By the time I was 16, already had my first personal training cert, my first nutrition cert. Like I've literally been paid since I was 16 years old to write fitness programs and nutrition programs. Right. And it was mind blowing to me, like literally mind blowing to me, learning certain things. And then, I still have old textbooks, going through these textbooks, right? Like in my textbooks, there's no mention anywhere about anti-nutrients. I never knew what an anti-nutrient was. I never knew what an oxalate was, a phytate, like I never knew. There's like 10. I never knew any of them, right? I never knew what a glycinate was, right? Like never knew anything. There's nothing in there. And then it pops off in your head, like you asked me, you never thought about that? No, because I just thought it was normal. I thought it was normal. I was bloated all the time. I had constipation. I had IBS because everybody I knew had it, right? And the funny thing is, it is such a bodybuilder thing. Like if you talk to 10 bodybuilders, like that live that bodybuilder lifestyle, they're all bloated. They all have IBS. They all have constipation. They all have basically digestional issues. And why? Because literally the oxalates, the phytates, the lectins, because they're eating a large amount of vegetables and fruits that have that, right? And literally, we know that anti-nutrients destroy the lining of your intestinal walls, your stomach, your gut, decreases absorption, right? I just thought it was normal. I'd wake up, feel great, eat my first meal, feel bloated and be uncomfortable all day. It was like Groundhog Day for literally 30 years. Eat my first meal, bloated, be uncomfortable all day, go to sleep, wake up, feel good. Like when I was around 3 weeks in and I noticed, holy crap, my stomach's flat, feel great, right? And then I noticed, I'm not going as often, but when I'm going, I'm having no issues, right? Like, and I'm like, this is different, right? And I had such issues with my digestional system, bloating, cramping, extension, gas. constipation, IBS. Like, it was brutal. And I tried everything: medications, probiotics, antibiotics, like friggin', herbal teas. I have friends that were naturopaths, chiropractors, doctors, like tried everything. Nothing worked. Fiber, the big fiber thing, right? You need more fiber. And nothing worked. Literally, I go carnivore, no carbs, no sugar, no fruits, no vegetables, no rice, no pasta, no potatoes, no bread. And within 2 to 3 weeks, it's like my entire digestive system was healed. And I'm like, you're friggin' kidding me. My entire adult life, I struggled, and like, and you're freaking kidding me. And then, you know, opening my eyes, doing a little research, finding out these things. And then, then it's correlation, right? I'm a little bit of a science geek, right? I look for causation, correlation, and then I start talking to all my friends that lived the lifestyle. And yeah, it was just bang, bang, bang. Everyone had the same thing. Bang, bang, bang. Everyone had the same thing. And then, I tell them my experience, they start doing it. Then 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks, yeah, no more bloating, no more cramping,
Yeah.
kinda balancing out, and we're like, our just minds are being blown, right? And that's
So
what I tell
talk
people,
talk
like, yeah,
talk to me about when the topic of carnivore first entered your life, because I think we're in a
yeah,
nice transition here in our chat where you've clearly indicated. It's really interesting to hear. Let me first say this. It's I don't know anything about the bodybuilder industry. Nothing. So it's very interesting to hear what you're sharing about how, I mean, I see online, I see them dying, but I also know that, of course, probably many of them are on steroids and other products that are not very good and don't work towards longevity. But what you're sharing, I wasn't aware of that. So that's very, very interesting hearing it from someone who basically not just noticing it as theory, but as practice and who lived like this.
yeah,
And then you
yeah,
were
the way I got started in carnivore, I had 2 nutrition clients ask me, "Hey, can I do the carnivore lifestyle?" And I remember like yesterday, I said no, and I wasn't being as nice as I am now. I used a little profanity joking, and I said, "No, you can't do that crap. You need carbs, proteins, and fats. You have to balance them out." Right? And then what happened is, it was like not even a month later, maybe 2, 3 weeks later, I start getting all these messages from people. In 4 weeks, I got 39 people ask me about doing a diet of just meats and fats. They're calling it
why?
carnivore,
Why all of a
right?
sudden? Why
Well,
did that
I
happen all
what
of a
happened
sudden?
was, yeah, I forget who it was. I think it was actually Dr. Sean Baker, who we know is one of our biggest carnivore advocates, and he's the one who's kind of rejuvenated the space. I think he did a podcast, kind of went viral, right? And then, you know, and then people were interested and they were looking for someone. And obviously that was my job, right? So it was funny, because I never thought about it. But then when you have literally 40 people ask you, and now that's how I make my living, pay my bills, support my family, I'm like, okay, listen, can't turn away 40 people. So, but I was 100% honest with all of them. I said, listen, I've heard of it. We talked about the no carb thing and how we utilized it. I said, I've never done it as a lifestyle, and I'm not comfortable, writing you a nutrition or diet protocol based on something I don't know 120% about or that I never did. So I was honest with them. I said, let me do some research, let me do it on my own, and then we'll get back to it. And, half of them were okay with that. And I kept half, the rest went because they didn't want to wait. And that's how I started. I didn't take it seriously. I said, I'm going to do it for 30 days, see what this is all about. And literally, not that it was a joke, but I didn't take it seriously. It literally has changed my life forever, right? Like, it was nuts. I did some research, which, close to a decade ago, it was hard, like very little, right? Dr. Baker, Salandino, there's a couple others. Um, got some books, did some reading, reached out to a few people, found some groups, started talking. I did 3 weeks with the research, figured out how I was gonna do it, I implemented it, and, the rest is history. Literally 20 days later, I'm like, never gonna do basically, eat a carb again. And then what happened is I started posting about it, right? And this was kind of when social media was just coming about and talking about it. And then a lot of my clients and friends saw it, family members, they wanted to try it. And I'm like, yeah, I used around 100 people in the first 3 months as guinea pigs, and And I was honest with them. I said, listen, I'm going to use you as my guinea pigs. You just have to cover my costs for doing all the work, and we're going to record and see how everything goes. That 3 months was so dramatic when it came to people's results and what they're getting and how they're feeling. I made the decision because, I was literally doing a macro based, nutrition and coaching program for 35 years. I changed it. I said, I'm never going to eat a carb again. I don't think we need carbohydrates. I think people will thrive in this space. And I changed my entire nutrition and coaching practice to a ketogenic, being carnivore, right? And, since then I've expanded a bit to ketogenic, like keto, animal based, and carnivore, because there is a dramatic difference between them. But I've come to the point where I think that, you know, a lifestyle burning fat for energy is the optimal human lifestyle. So, in my opinion, there's no necessity for carbohydrates, right? So why have them, right? And that's why people always ask me, "Do you hate carbs?" And I'm like, "No, I don't hate carbs." I go, "But they're not necessary." I go, "If something's not necessary, why would you do it?" Right? Like, and you got to think now, and now my every thought I have when it came to nutrition, it's spinning, and I'm thinking all this stuff. And then I just kind of figured out, most of our issues when it comes to our health and our energy and things is literally because we're over consuming carbohydrates. We're not balancing them. The body doesn't require them. Let's just eliminate them. Right. And that's how I kind of got started into carnivore, literally just because people asked, and I'm glad they did. And I always tell people, because of my issues with my eating disorders and my food dependencies, carnivore probably saved my life if you actually think about it, because I was in denial about being addicted to carbs and sugars. I lied about it. I hid it. Right. Um, you know, People always ask me all the time, what's a food dependency? And I go, well, a food dependency is you're needing to eat that food to feel better. It's like a drug. It's like drugs with alcohol, right? Individuals, use drugs, alcohol to make themselves feel better and forget. But the majority of people don't do that because it's hard to hide, right? Food's very hard to hide, easy to hide, right? The,
Yeah.
the only way you really know is because you end up getting fat, right? But people get fat all the time. People just think you're eating a lot, or, your metabolism, Um, but that was me. Like, I would have a rough day, I would be stressed. Food is the only thing that made me feel better and comfort me for that short period of time. And I was that guy that basically would go to McDonald's, get 2, 3, Big Mac meals and hide in a parking lot and eat them all, right? And you feel euphoric, you feel great because that's a food science thing. It's releasing dopamine, serotonin. And then just like you crash off a hard drug, 45 minutes later, you feel horrible, you get it down, and you're mad at yourself, you're disgusted with yourself. You say you're never going to do that again. 3 days later, you're in your car hiding, eating a whole pizza, right? That's addiction, right?
Yeah.
And, you're addicted and you don't even know. And the reality is, the way I was taught to eat made me addicted, and you don't even know it. And, that's one of the reasons, I have discussions with people, because there's so many people, it's dogmatic. They think sugar's not the problem. People are the problem, right? And I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "If sugar's not the problem, why do companies have, literally in North America, 67 different names for sugar to hide it?" Right? Because they're smart. They're real smart. They have these food biologists, these food scientists. They know, if I can put 2 or 3 sugars in there, couple vegetable oils, I literally increase the palatability and the addiction of this food from 10% to 50, right? And that's why people wanna consume, consume, consume it, right? The reason why the government will never, or the FDA will never, tell you that sugar is a drug and it's addictive, because they would be liable for, the last 50, 60 years of the literally abuse that food companies have basically done with all these people, their health,
Yeah.
basically like depression, anxiety, like everything, right? Um, like, it's crazy. And it's simply crazy that when people get over that sugar addiction, that carb addiction, which literally only takes around 3 to 5 days, you come off of it like a drug, but not the same length, that how you start to change, right? Like I tell people all the time, my relationship with food has changed, right? Um, like, I don't think of food. I don't want anything. Like, if you would have told me when I started being Italian, I would never have pizza, pasta, cannoli, gelato again, I would have told you you're ludicrous. You're crazy, right? And I remember, you know, I would skip family occasions. I would skip social events. I would skip work events if it was based around food because I had an issue with food. I had no control. And for me, it would set me off where I would spiral like a week or two, right? So, I remember, skipping a birthday just because I know we're Italian, we eat for 4 or 5 hours, right? There's an abundance of food, right? Where it's crazy now. Like after around 6 months carnivore, it was nuts that I could sit in a room with my family and literally there's a 20-foot table with like food to feed an army and no issues, no desire, no want. Having a relationship with food, there's acknowledgement. Yeah, the pizza smells good. And I remember I ate it for literally 40, 50 years of my life. Probably tastes good, but I have no desire to basically have it because I feel great and I'm fine. And when you eat what your body requires, it never asks you for anything, right? So
Yeah.
my body doesn't ask me for anything. So I don't struggle to get something, right? Which people really don't understand. When the body functions properly, it doesn't ask you for anything, right? When it's not functioning, it's always asking you. It wants something, right? And what happens is because your body's addicted to sugar, it gives you that response. That's the first thing it's looking for. And it might be you're dehydrated. It might be you're not getting enough nutrients and your body's asking for it, but it comes off in that signal, right? Where now, if my body asks me for something, it's a different signal. Like, you know, I eat based on time, like, it's crazy. Like, not being hungry, I eat based on time. Like, I'm in maintenance, I eat 2 meals over 6 hours, and then I'm in a fasted state for 18 hours a day. But, like, because I'm busy and I keep busy and, I like my basically alarm goes off at 1 and 6, and if I'm not eating, then I go eat. But there's times where if my alarm doesn't go off, I would just work straight through. Right? Where
Yeah.
before I always wanted to eat every hour of the day, right? I used to joke with people, I had food friends, and they're like, "What does that mean?" And I go, "Well, I know if I wanted to go for all you can eat sushi, I just have to text one of my friends, start a random conversation. I literally know within 5 minutes you'll say, 'Hey, want to go for sushi?' Absolutely." You know, and I had one for sushi, one for Chinese food, one for chicken wings, and one for Thai, right? And literally, I would, make my food, eat all my food, still hungry. Oh, I really love Thai right now, man. Oh, I'm gonna text Rich, right? Literally 5 minutes conversation with Rich. Oh, bro, what are you doing? You want to grab Thai? Absolutely, buddy. I can be there in 10 minutes. Let's go. Right. And, that was my life. Where now it's like, it's funny, my wife, like, for our birthdays, it's the only time we go out to eat. And she's like, where do you want to go? And we struggle because not being hungry, and not really craving or wanting anything, it's hard to figure out where you want to go. So, like
Yeah.
nothing really excites you, it's different.
And
Food
no,
tastes
and no
great when,
steakhouse can prepare a steak like you can. This
yeah,
is what I
like,
ran into. I went for my birthday 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. I went to this beautiful local. I live in Spain, right? So there's this beautiful local kind of what you could call a steakhouse, and they do the most amazing meat in the world. And we went there, and it was nice, but me and my girlfriend, we looked at each other. We were like, we do this ribeye better. We're just better at making steaks than a steakhouse. So where do you go for to go out for dinner? I totally agree with you. If I go to a restaurant, they always say like, well, you can eat anything in a restaurant. You can always have a steak or you can have some
yeah,
fish. True, you can, but it's never as good as when I make it
yeah,
myself at home. Yeah.
yeah,
So I that
absolutely.
totally
And
resonates.
yeah, and that's a common theme, and,
Yeah.
it's funny, we've been doing it for long enough, we both get the same thing, it's hard to go out, it's actually not, if you unless you go to a vegan or vegetarian restaurant, which why would you? Like, bottom line is every restaurant you usually go to, 70% of the menu is meat, beef,
Yeah.
pork, chicken, salmon, tuna, mussel, shrimp, calamari, like, there's lots of options, it's just how you're comfortable with asking and figuring out,
Yeah.
like People, oh, it's so hard on vacation. I'm like, really? Where are you going? Oh, I'm going on a cruise. Are you kidding me? There's an abundance of meat and fish on cruises that you
Yeah.
can eat like a king. I go, it's just, you want to use the excuse to basically eat garbage because they have abundance of basically sweets and all that other stuff too, right? It's choice. The reality is, if this is your lifestyle, you choose to eat it, right? And that's the question, because when your lifestyle is macros, you choose to eat it. When your lifestyle is vegetarian, you choose to eat it. You don't hear a vegetarian basically saying, "Oh, I'm going on a cruise, it's going to be hard and I'm basically going to eat meat," right? Like they don't do that, right? And like it always makes me laugh when people say, "Oh, it's so hard." I go, "No, like it's making choices and just figuring out how you do it, right? Because you're always eating, right? That's
So
the
Joe,
thing I
let
always
me
tell
let me
people,
let me ask you this. I'm very interested
Yes,
to
sir.
hear this. You've lived the carb lifestyle as a bodybuilder, as somebody in the fitness industry for very long. You build a certain identity around that, I guess. Then carnivore comes around. You get all these people telling you we want to start doing carnivore. Eventually, of course, you have a business to run. You go like, all right, let's give it a try. You give it a try. It changes your life. What happens to your identity when you change? Because they probably knew you as the fitness trainer with the macros, you're training heaps of people, and now all of a sudden you're carnivore. What happens to the identity of Joe?
Yeah, that comes up a lot. Like, it's funny. I run into people I haven't seen in a little while. They're like, "Oh, are you training for a show?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Oh, you doing a photo shoot?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Oh, you going on vacation?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Well, why are you so lean? Why are you in such great shape?" And I say, "Well, it's just my life." Right? And then we start talking about it, right? And then they're amazed, "Oh, you know me," like, "But fruits and vegetables, right?" And I said, "No, especially no fruits and vegetables," right? And yeah, it's totally different. And it's funny. I ran into someone I haven't seen in around 4 months. The first thing she said to me is 4 months ago, that I haven't seen in a few years, is she said to me, "Wow, you look fantastic." And she wasn't referring to the weight. She was like just referring to my skin. Like she actually said, "You radiate." Says you kind of glow. And she said to me, she goes, "Do you age?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "You look younger now than you did 4 years ago." And I said to her, I go, "Well," and she had no idea because she doesn't have social media. I go, "Well, that's a carnivore thing." And she's like, What does that mean?" And I go, "Well, it's a carnivore thing. A carnivore is a meatitarian. All we eat is meat and fat. But, when you're carnivoring properly, what ends up happening is, yeah, I refer all the time. I'm 57, feel like I'm 37, look like I'm 47, right? And 47 is just because I don't want to be kind of, over gracious to my own self. But yeah, like people say, well, you don't even look like 47. You actually look like you're 37. And I'm like, well, it's because, I'm eating the way the body was meant to eat, so it's paying me back. And that's kind of the thing that people don't get, right? Like I did a consult 4 weeks ago, and I'm just talking to this gentleman, and like, going through the basics, and I asked him his age. I guess he saw my face when he told me his age because he was 39. I thought he was older than me, right? And and he saw my face and he asked, and I said, "I'll be honest with you, I thought you were older than me." And he goes, "Oh, for sure I'm older than you." And I said, "Well, no, I'm 57, you're 39." And he's like, "What?"
Hmm.
And I said, "And I bet I can tell you, you know, your lifestyle." And he's like, "What?" "I bet I can tell you you're not, moving every day. I bet I can tell you you're probably eating out 2 or 3 times a day. I bet," and we went through the gamut, and he goes, "Yeah, it's 90% correct." And I said, "There's this thing that you've probably never heard of. It's called food stress." I go, the things you're eating is stressing your body and it's literally aging you, right? And I go, because man, like I literally, when I met you, I thought you were older than I was. And it's incredible how many people you meet and you find out their age and they look 20 years old, right? And they don't realize that what they're eating is basically doing it. It's affecting their nervous system. It's affecting, their vital organs, their kidney and their liver. It's overworked. It's overwhelmed. It's overstressed. Right. And, Eh, and, the thing that kind of gets me is everybody wants to blame everything but what they're eating. They want to blame their genetics. They want to blame their environment. They want to blame stress, right? Or there must be something wrong with me. And it's like, no, those things, they do matter, but they're minimal. It's what you're eating. Nothing affects your body more than consumption, what you eat, what you put in it, right? But we're told it doesn't, right? As long as you're following your macros, you're in a deficit, you're eating low fat, it's healthy for you, right? But literally it's
Yeah.
not. Body wasn't designed that way. And it's literally, killing people slowly, right? And that's what it is, right? Like when you're in your 30s and 40s and look 20 years older, it's aging you. Well, isn't that aging? You know, we know we know we know three things are certain in life, or really two. You're gonna pay taxes and you're gonna die one day, right? The question is, well, when am I gonna die? Well, it's just a matter of time, you know, outside of an accident. But literally when you're consuming foods that age you, well, guess what? You're killing yourself slowly and quicker because
Yeah.
you're aging yourself. Instead of aging gracefully, you're not. You're speeding that up, right? And that's one of the things that it's one of the things that I love about this lifestyle is the simple fact that like people say, oh, there's no long-term studies that you're going to live longer. I go, but there's none that you aren't, right? And I always tell people you're your best coach, and they have no idea what that means. And I said, you know there's no one knows, Patrick, you know yourself the best. You know how you felt 2 months ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, right? Better than anyone. So, if I feel like $1,000,000, my energy is fantastic, my sleep's fantastic, my mood's fantastic, don't have any digestional issues, my body doesn't ache anymore. Like, but I love how people will just neglect that. Doesn't matter how you feel, right? It's, like basically that's not healthy. And it's like, no, it's like literally, when you're existing and you're just existing, but you're existing based on discomfort and pain, that's not the quality of life, right? We get into this lifestyle, we feel like $1,000,000. How many times have you heard that? People talking about doing this. I feel the best I've ever felt. I feel like $1,000,000, right?
Yeah.
And I tell people
Everybody.
being in the macro
Everybody.
space for 35 years,
Yeah.
did people lose a little bit of weight? Absolutely. Did people feel a little better? Absolutely. Did people ever say they feel like $1,000,000? Did people ever, get off of medication? Did they ever reverse a sickness, an ailment, an injury? Never, right? Because it just doesn't happen because it's calories in, calories out, right? Which we know only works for so long because once that balances out, you still have to lose. You're not going to lose because it's not really all about thermodynamics. It's about basically hormonal responses, metabolic responses. How many people, you know, do the macro thing, get in a deficit, don't lose weight, right? How many women, hundreds, thousands, millions of women across the world, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, thyroid issues, menopausal, perimenopausal. Guess what? You burn a deficit. Do you lose weight? No, because it's based on a hormonal response. They get into
Yeah.
our lifestyle 2, 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, the body's healing itself, hormones are balancing out. Miraculously, they're losing weight,
It's
right?
amazing
And it's
how
because
when you eat a species appropriate diet, I noticed. So when I started with carnivore, which was soon to be 3 years ago, I've always been very skinny. So I gained weight. I'm 9 kilograms heavier than I was when I started because I was super skinny. My girlfriend, who was, I hope she's not going to listen to this podcast, was maybe slightly chubby, I would say, definitely not overweight. She eats the same amount as me. So we've done the math now multiple times, and we are easily 3,000 calories a day, spread out over just 2 meals, because it goes quick when you have a big ass ribeye for dinner. And she has lost weight, over 3,000 calories. This whole thing, and when you say this online, when you react to people talking about calories in, calories out, they always say, well, you're not, carnivore works because you're in a caloric deficit. Well, then explain to me why I gained weight and she lost weight while eating the same. But I think it's a little bit like probably what you were dealing with in all those years that you were before you were carnivore. There's this cognitive dissonance. It is not that. It's everything else but what you've been taught to believe. And it's not until you start doing carnivore and you start to notice it on your own body, whichever direction it's taking you, that direction is always the direction of homeostasis and the direction of health. And then you go like, hold on a moment. Now I understand what everybody has been talking about. And the whole calories in, calories out just doesn't work anymore in a sense
Yeah,
that,
the
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, the whole calories in, calorie out thing, that's the entire macro existence. You have to be in a deficit to lose weight, right? And, the funny aspect is if you look at the majority of people carnivoring properly, if you work out their macros backwards, because of the amount of fat they're eating, if you look at their body's expenditure, they're actually in a surplus, but they're still losing weight,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Because weight gain and weight loss is really about two things: hormonally, how your body's functioning, right? When we talk about cortisol, insulin, and estrogen, right? And then it's about an energy surplus, expenditure and surplus, right? And the ironic thing is, people's perception is, well, if I'm fat and I'm eating fat, well, fat makes you fat. Well, it actually doesn't. That's basically what we were told. That's what we were taught, right? And all the macro-based people get super pissed when they hear people that say, carbs make you fat. And the reality is, well, will a carb make you fat? Well, not necessarily a carb or an amount of carb, but a surplus of carbs, absolutely. The thing is, it's much quicker to get to a surplus of excess energy without burning it in carbohydrates than it is in fat. And that's
Yep.
what most people don't understand. You know, Ask most registered dietitians, most registered nutritionists, how many calories of energy your body can hold from fat. They have no idea because they're not taught that. But they're taught that basically through carbohydrates, right? Because if they're taught that, the window would go off. Well, it doesn't make sense fat would make fat because it's virtually impossible to get into excess of energy through fat because the body can hold up to 100,000 calories of energy from fat. It can only hold 2,000 calories of energy from carbohydrates, right? So there's a big discrepancy there. So for you as a human to get to, you know, excess fat storage, you would literally have to consume 100,000 calories.
This is interesting because I've never heard this before. Where do you hold on
Yeah.
to these
So when a lot of
100,000
people are
calories of
unaware,
fat in your body? Where is that?
well, the body has the ability. The reason why you as a human, you could fast 30 days as long as you're hydrated because of all that stored energy, right? Um, and that's why, when you're living in a ketogenic lifestyle, fasting's easy, right? Because when the body's in a fasted state, it's getting everything it needs. It doesn't ask you for anything else, right? We have the ability as humans consuming fat to hold up to 100,000 calories of energy. To get to a surplus, you have to go over that. And if you're in a surplus and you don't burn, the body will convert excess energy, if it's not burned, into fat. And that's what happens with carbs, right? That's why it's super easy. 2,000. So let's do the math. 2,000 calories. If you divide every gram, math is simple, 4 calories. That is 500 grams. So an adult like myself and you, we can consume 500 grams in 1 or 2 days. So by the end of the week, yeah, you could be in a surplus of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Well, if you don't burn that, well, it's going to convert into fat and store. 100,000 calories of energy. Let's do the math. Every gram, it's double, it's 9 calories, but that's 11,000 grams of fat. If you take a cube of butter, which is 450 grams, if you ate 10 of those, you're at 4,500 grams, right? 4,500 grams, 11,000 grams. So you're nowhere close. That's why, like, I consume on average 240 to 300 grams of fat a day. I haven't gained a pound, right? Like, literally, in 7.5 years, and I consume a large amount of fat. It's because fat doesn't make you fat. That's the perception, right? And it's very hard to get there. And what happens is the body has this abundance of stored fat. So as long as you're tapped into it and you don't have a negative hormonal response, it will burn it, right? Now, It's a natural thing when you're carnivoring properly. And what that means is your body's getting enough support nutritionally. Uh, it will functionally, hormonally balance out. It doesn't want to hold on to excess body fat. That's not normal, right? Like what I found out over the years working with people, most guys carnivoring properly, and the longer they do it, they're going to get between around 10 to 14%. Some stay a little higher, some are a little lower based on lifeline and genetics. Most women, it's 16 to 20%. And when you actually think of, how effortless that is, and you look really well, and that's why most people carnivoring, you know, we hear it all the time, I'm not exercising, I have muscles. What's going on? Right? And the first thing is, well, your body's getting rid of all this excess water it doesn't need from the carbohydrates. It's getting rid of all this excess fat it obviously doesn't need. And then it naturally gets to a point where this is a healthy amount of fat. This is what my body needs. Right.
Yeah.
And then you're not getting enough based on eating because when carnivores are carnivoring properly, you get to this eventual state. It's called cruising, where everything's basically functioning awesome. My energy's great, my sleep's great, my mood's great, digestion's great, like no deviation. And then if we do notice a deviation, because we're in that state of cruising, we literally think of it for 24 hours. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Yesterday I missed one meal, so I probably didn't get enough fat as what I needed. Oh yeah, yesterday I usually drink around 3 liters of water. I only drank 1 liter. That's why I was cramping up a little, right? Like it's very easy to figure out, right? Um, but yeah, like it's nuts. Like people really don't understand hormonally and metabolically. There's such a difference once you eliminate carbs, right? When you're consuming carbs, fats, and proteins, well, now the body has to deal with all of those. And because the majority of what you're eating is carbs and your body doesn't require them, that's what gives you the most amount of issues, right? It's amazing to me, you know, most uh most basically dietitians and nutritionists, they don't even know the definition of a non-essential macronutrient, right? Because the reality is when you get a nutrition textbook, Nutrition 101, they teach you carbs, proteins, fats, non-essential, essential, essential. They'll tell you carbs right in the textbook are non-essential, but these are all the good reasons why you want to have them. They'll tell you meats and fats are essential, but these are all the good reasons why you shouldn't have them, right?
Yeah, it's
And
true,
it's
huh?
all literally misinformation,
Yeah.
right? Like, so the definition of a non-essential macronutrient is your body doesn't require 1 gram of a carb because there's not a nutrient found in a carbohydrate that your body won't already produce on its own if it needs it, right? When people tell you carbs are essential, they're not. Okay. And with science, we have what we call theoretical science, which is based on a theory and it's debatable. And then we have what we call scientific absolutes. There's no debate. Well, these three macronutrients and their definitions are scientific absolutes. There's no debate. So when it says something's non essential, it means you don't need it. So why is there always buts? Oh, you need it for energy. No. If you're basically a true statement is I'm choosing to eat carbs for energy. Not that it's necessary, because it's not. Because if you eliminate carbs, your body has actually a much more efficient, much more effective energy source. It's fat, right? Oh, you need carbohydrates for brain. Well, no, now you're talking about glucose. Well, guess what? If your body lacks glucose, the liver will produce it, right? Oh, carbs are basically, they're your body's preferred energy source. No, you guys are basically mixing the meaning of preferred to it's a quicker energy source, but it's not preferred, because if it was preferred, the body would be able to store more. People don't even realize that. Why is it that the body only holds 2,000 calories of energy from carbs? Well, I'll tell you why. Because as humans, we existed for almost a million years before foraging and eating carbs. And the carbs we ate weren't the carbs today. We're talking, you know, weed, twigs, grass, bark, leaves, right? It was much different. But what happened was, as humans, when we evolved, we didn't know if we're going to eat once a day, once a week, once a year. So the body needed this energy source that it would store a lot and we would have an abundance. So because you got to remember, first humans were hunted. We didn't sleep a lot. We moved all the time because we would have been eaten, right? I always have a joke because a lot of the carnivore haters or meat eater haters, they'll say, yeah, but our ancestors only lived to 35 years old. And I said, yeah, but we didn't have shelter. We didn't live in buildings. We didn't have weapons. And we were hunted by saber-toothed tigers. I'd like to see how long you would last with a saber-toothed tiger now, even with that stuff. You wouldn't make it to 35 years old. They did because they hunted, they adapted, and that was their life, right? But I love when they always say that. Sorry, that was just off topic. But
It's funny. It's funny you
yeah,
say that because
so
I
what
actually just
happened is
created a reel about that as well. Because it's exactly
that's
that
awesome.
thing that
So
you always
so
hear.
what
Like
happened was,
we live till 35 years old. In antiquity, we lived till 35. Well, that was the average lifespan. That was not. But also,
yeah.
death at
Well, listen,
childbirth was a very big one as well for the average to come
well,
down.
we
It hadn't.
didn't,
It
you
was not
know,
like we were eating meat and we dropped that by 30 years old because we had a wrong diet.
yeah, and people don't realize we didn't get over 50 until the 1900s, early 1900s. Even in the 1800s, the average age was still 40 and lower, right? And with, medicine and certain things they understood, yeah, childbirth, like, and things like that. So, yeah, that is such a weak argument, and it's just, it's brutal. Well, two things that people really don't get. So the first thing is the carb thing, right? So we go almost a million years, then we start eating carbs. So the body literally doesn't know food, right? Doesn't know what shrimp is, doesn't know what chicken is, doesn't know what, rice is. The body literally recognizes food as support, it's a protein, or energy, it's a carb or fat, right? Really doesn't define what it is, right? So what happened is we started foraging, we started eating on bark, the leaves, and the body recognized it as energy, but we already had a really great energy source. We didn't need another one. And that's literally why the body only stores 2,000 calories of energy, right? Because it doesn't need another great energy source. We already have one, right? But that's why I love these people say it's your preferred. That's their new thing. You're preferred, you're preferred, you're preferred. And it's like, no, you're saying that because it's quicker. I go, but your body utilizes carbs quicker, but that's why you have the crashes and the ups and the crashes. And you get into that cycle of eating them and eating them and eating them. I have a client, she is a professional triathlete and she's fat adapted now. And she says it's insane. She functions like a superhero. She utilizes fat for energy. I taught her how to fat load outside of using the fat on her body. And she goes, she's on her bike whizzing by all these guys doing their sugar gel packs, because they spike up on all this sugar and then they crash and they have to do it again. And then they crash and they have to do it again. And she's like, I haven't eaten in 4 hours. She goes, I'm 3 hours into a race. And she goes, and I function amazing. And it's because her body's utilizing fat for energy. It's a much more efficient, much more effective energy, and you just got to learn how to utilize it properly. Where all these guys, when they're addicted to carbs, they got to be constantly loading, constantly loading, constantly loading. How many times have you watched the Olympics and you see guys just literally drop? They're physically, mentally drained and exhausted is because their body ran out of all their sugar, all their carbs for energy, and it couldn't tap into the fat because they're not fat adapted and they're done,
Yeah.
right? Like it's incredible. So that's the first thing. People really don't understand, you know, the carbohydrate and the fat thing when it comes to energy. The other thing macro-based people really put their flag in the ground on is vitamins and minerals. You require vitamins and minerals. What are all these vitamins and minerals you're missing from not having the fruits and vegetables? And here's the thing people really don't understand is a non-essential macronutrient. Basically, it's not the vitamins and minerals aren't macros, they're microbes, right? And, if you want to use uh, the worst way to get information, Google or GTP chat, right? And if you go, definition of a micronutrient, right, which are minerals and vitamins, it will actually tell you your body needs very little. If you ask for the definition of macronutrients, it'll tell you your body needs a lot. Well, what's a macronutrient? Proteins and fats. And what is it that your body needs a lot of? Amino acids, essential amino acids, and essential fatty acids. Well, what is a micronutrient? Carbohydrates and the vitamins and minerals. The reason why they make such a big deal out of vitamins and minerals, because if they actually made the correct big deal that you require more essential amino acids and essential fats, well, you're not getting that from your carbohydrates, which we're told you need to eat 60, 70% of, right? And that's why, there's people on TikTok, oh, let's look at their macronutrients of the day and see if it's healthy. And the one guy with the mustache, and I like him, he's a cool guy, he's very smart, but I dig him all the time. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, because your body literally doesn't need these micronutrients, not macro, right? And if you did need micronutrients, guess what? There's over 70,000 you find in meat, right? And that's one of the reasons why, the reason in a macro based lifestyle, when you're consuming most carbohydrates, you need to supplement is because another thing they don't teach you, which I found out because I never knew this until I got into this space, your body can't, digest the majority of carbs you eat. It can literally only digest 25% and absorb 10%, right? So when they give you these stats like blueberry, the superfood, it's based on the assumption you're going to digest 100%, absorb 100%. What they don't tell you is basically, take a couple blueberries, take out 3/4 that literally stores in your body as feces matter, literally crap that has to come out, and your body will only absorb 25%. Sorry, digest 25%. But out of that 25%, it only absorbs 10. So you literally get no nutritional value from that. And that's the reason you have to basically supplement because you're missing, right? And because the average person only eats a third of their daily intake from meats and fats, they're not getting the vital nutrients they need, right? So, that's why so many people have deficiencies. It's amazing when you eliminate carbs and you just eat proteins and fats, how many people stop taking supplements because they get to the point where they just realize, wow, I don't require it. I was a big
Mm,
supplement guy, right? I have 3 certs in supplementation. I used to charge for my macro based clients, you could pay me $279, send me your blood work. I'd assess your blood work. Based on your blood work, I'd tell you where you're deficient, what vitamins and minerals you need to take. Do I do that for carnivore clients? No, because there's no need,
mhm.
right? Um, I won't get into doctors too much, but I get a physical every year. That's the only time I see a doctor. And ironically enough, we can talk about this after. I've been sick once in the last 7.5 years, right? Once. That is it. Okay. Where prior to that, doing macros, always sick. But so every year I do my physical, I get the extended blood work because I'm kind of a science geek. I like going over everything, right? Um, and I always checked my vitamin and minerals, always deficient, always depleted, right? And eating hundreds of grams of carbs, taking all the supplements, good quality of supplements, high absorption rates, always, always had deficiencies. I'm a year and a half carnivore, do my yearly physical, get my blood work, going through my vitamins. First time in my adult life, no vitamin deficiencies. Meanwhile, no fruits, no vegetables, no supplements, just meats and fats. And then I was talking to a friend of mine who's a chiropractor and a doctor and who is really big into the keto lifestyle. And he's like, well, what happens is if your body needs a certain amount of minerals or vitamins, it will actually produce it on its own through amino acids. They convert. But the problem is because people don't eat enough, it doesn't happen. When you get into this lifestyle, now you're eating 90%, 100% all of meats and fats. You're getting those 9 essential amino acids, those 2 essential fatty acids, which your body requires, which they can't produce unless you eat them. And basically, it balances out your body. And that's why we don't have deficiencies, right? And that's why, people
Mm.
always tell you, there's a great clip of the last meat stock where they had the panel up there, Dr. Berry, Butter Gal, and 2 others. And this guy asked them, what are your top supplements? And all of
I've
them,
seen
don't
that.
take any,
Yeah.
don't take
Yeah.
any, don't take any.
Yeah.
Beef, butter, eggs, don't take any, don't take any meats
Yeah.
and fats, right?
Yeah.
And, it's because you get everything your body needs, right? It's such a rat race and circle, when you just basically, and that's the thing people don't get. Like, yeah, and I have such a hard time letting it go. We talked about Mark. You were on a podcast with Mark a little earlier. I forget Dr. Sarah's last name. She's out of the UK. She was actually kicked out of the medical industry. Now she's a natural doctor because she wouldn't promote the food guide in UK, right? Um, she said something that was very resonating to me. Once you know the truth, you have to deal with the consequences. And Mark asked her, "What does that mean?" She goes, "You can't lie." Right? And I feel the exact same way. Like, you know, I have a side hustle. My main job is an online carnivore nutrition coach. My side hustle is, 2 days a week, I'm a head trainer and nutritionist at a friend of mine's gym, helping them out. And when people come talk to me about nutrition, I can't even sugarcoat macro-based lifestyle. Just doesn't happen. I explain to them, this is what a macro-based lifestyle, this is what a ketogenic lifestyle looks like. These are all the issues you're going to have with macros. These are all the great things you're going to have with the ketogenic lifestyle, right? And, I convert everyone to basically do a ketogenic lifestyle, whether it's carnivore, whether it's animal based, or whether it's keto, for the simple fact that they're much more effective. They're much more effective. And I said, why do you want to run in circles? Right? And that's literally what you're going to do. And you're going to have very little health changes. And it's going to take you 2 times longer, 3, 4 times longer to get to where you want to be. Right. I joke with people all the time because I get a lot of people coming up to me in the gym because obviously I look good, I train hard. Um, but like I don't lift heavy and I'm not in there for 2 or 3 hours. Right. And I always tell people I'd let my nutrition do all my work for me. Right. And, like I posted a video today, my legs, I go, legs made by meat, right? Like, and that's what people don't realize, you're running uphill constantly when you're under eating proteins and fats and overeating carbohydrates. And that's literally what everyone's doing.
So, Joe, there was something at the beginning of the podcast. I just want to rewind right to the beginning. And because I
Yeah.
remembered this one that I found very interesting, is you said that finding carnivore and the carnivore lifestyle, of course, as we've seen throughout the podcast, has changed so much in your life, but it also
Yeah.
changed you spiritually. Could you
Yeah.
talk about that, please?
Well, yeah, like I kind of think of, as a human being, as a person, you know, ever since I found carnivore and basically, just feeling better, like, spiritually, basically, I'm a better human. I'm a better man. I'm a better partner. I'm a better dad. Actually, it makes me a little emotional thinking about it, right? You don't really think when you're not kind of healthy, you don't, like you're not the best version of yourself. So if you're not your best version of yourself, it's hard to be the best person for other people, especially you care about, right? So for me, I'm Roman Catholic, and I'm the guy that goes to church a couple times a year, so I'm more spiritual than more religious. But the reality is, this has changed me internally and out and it's how I express myself and with other people, right? Like I think I'm a better friend. I think I'm a better, employer employee when in that relationship. I'm a better coach, right? Just for the simple fact that I function better, right? Like, people say about all the time, no brain fog, mental clarity. It's amazing when you have mental clarity, how you think and how you assess things and how you deal with things, right? Like stress. How many people, because their body's overwhelmed and overstressed, when they get stressed, they're just a basket case, right? I've had so many people tell me that, they suffered from depression, anxiety, stress. It's gone. And just even dealing with stress, they would have told me my old me, I would lose it, where now I function much better in it. And I believe, I'm the same way. So, yeah, when we talk about spiritually, it's really just being a better person, a better human. And that just means like I said, I'm a better, basically, husband. I'm a better partner. I'm a better dad. And I'm a better friend. Right. Which, uh, which is, like, really, that's where everything starts, right? Like,
That's beautiful.
be the best person you can, and then everything else, comes back, right? Um, and I have this discussion with people all the time too, because, sometimes we don't put ourselves first because we think maybe it might be selfish, right? But in the reality is once I started getting into this lifestyle and feeling better, I did put myself first and I did basically kind of dive in because I realized by putting myself first, being the best version of myself, the best person, it's easier for me to support the people I need to support and take care of the people I take care of. And I kind of tell that to clients that, I have some clients that say, oh, the commitment, the money, I got to take care of that. And I said, well, listen, you got to take care of yourself first. The healthier you are, the better you are, better you can take care of others. Right. And we kind of forget that. Right. And that's something that's kind of really came up to me. Like, like just we talked about it earlier, just epiphany of things that have happened over time. I never realized until I got into this lifestyle how much pain my body was in, how much discomfort my body was in, inflammation, arthritis, bursitis, some old injuries. Like I was living on Tylenol, I was living on Advil, I was living on Aleve, and it wasn't even a thought and not realizing and knowing, I remember always telling people that stuff's horrible on your stomach, but meanwhile, I was taking it every day just to basically function, right? And it was just kind of another epiphany where, my wife would go basically, Jamie, my carnivore queen, my partner I always talk about and post videos with. I, she would go to Costco around every other month and she'd say, hey, we need Advil or Aleve or Tylenol. And I'm like, no, they're almost full, right? Because we're not using them, right? So just like little things like that. And you really don't realize, all the little things you think you're doing to be healthy, you're not. And then when you get into this lifestyle, how simplistic it is. And it's literally just eliminating all this stuff we're told, yeah, this is good for you, but it's actually not. But it's like, I use this word all the time, dogmatic, but it is. We've been inbred, over the years, and they double down and they say it and they say it and they say it. Like it's amazing. And I know you deal with it too every day. Oh, how about fiber? Oh, how about cholesterol? Oh, how about heart disease? Oh, how about your energy? It's like, and it's a broken record over and over and over and over and over again. It's funny. I do lives on TikTok, right? And I usually have around 10, 20 of my clients on the lives and they laugh. They send me messages after because I guess I got at one point so annoyed with the cholesterol thing. I used to roll my eyes and I used to get like short. Yeah. But then they had to remind me, remember, listen, a lot of people are new. They don't understand. They don't know. They're scared. And I go, you're absolutely right. I got to kind of dial down a bit. I've I've been called a carnivore Karen, the carnivore police, a carnivore thumper, because I don't deviate and I don't sugarcoat, right? Like some people are more pragmatic, some people, kind of be more like like a couple of my favorites, Dr. Baker, Dr. Chaffee. Dr. Baker is much nicer. He'll talk about, if you want to eat carbs, I don't care. And Dr. Chaffee, I like a little more. He's like, no, carbs are killing you. Don't eat them. They're not necessary. You don't need them. Well, that's me. They're not necessary. You don't need them. Because people go, oh, what's the big deal? Live a little. I love that one. Live a little. And I go, that's inherently the problem. You're living through food. I don't live through food anymore. I did that. I used to basically live to eat. Now I eat to live, and there's a
Mm,
dramatic difference, right?
yeah.
Even social events, right? We have taken social events and made them all about the food, not what they should be about, which is friends, family, haven't seen them in a while, conversing, enjoying, right? Like it's always astonished me, like, we go out and meet friends and there's 12 of us there and they're on their phone the entire time and we're like, did we come here to basically socialize, meet, or just stay on our phone? Let's take a picture of the steak and and like it's amazing to me, right? And it's just a dogmatic society. And I just love the fact that more and more people are kind of coming over to this side, being meatitarians. I always joke my goal was to convert 1 million meatitarians, right? I want to convert people to basically just eating meat and meat only. And and I'm working towards it and I'm going through it. But just same as you, my goal really, once you find out the truth and you know it, like you just want to let everyone else know. And that's kind of the thing,
Yeah.
I'm always on my pedestal, right? And people go through stages and I went through it. Like when you first start it, you're kind of embarrassed, you hide it, right? And you don't really tell too many people, you just kind of do your thing. And then you become that person that's hiding it, and then you kind of get defensive. You're 4 weeks in, 6 weeks in, things are getting great. And then when people are negative about it, you kind of get defensive. And then by around 10, 12 weeks, you become the advocate, right? You're feeling great. You're feeling fantastic. You end up talking people's heart, talking their ears off about it, and you end up inspiring them, right? Like I've had so many people tell me I just tried because I listened to you talk about it for 20 minutes, right? Or, like, and that's kind of the gist of it. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
it,
Joe, you're extremely inspiring, and I love how you've been sharing here on the podcast as well. Like the amount of knowledge you have about the carnivore diet is amazing. The transition you've gone through personally, but also through work, is very inspiring. I think what is also very interesting to see, of course, with you is that, as an older guy, because we are in our 50s, I'm also in my 50s,
yeah.
it also works is not just like metabolically flexible younger people, but it also works. It probably even works better for us since we are in our 50s. It's amazing to hear your story. Joe, if anybody wants to follow you, if anybody wants more information, wants to see these TikTok lives and participate,
Yeah.
follow you on YouTube, Instagram, can you share where they can find you, please?
Yeah, absolutely. On TikTok and Instagram, my moniker is the same. It's at Coach Carnivore Joe. On Facebook, it's Joe Dalle Vedove or Dalle Vedove, like the way you say it. If people want to basically just reach out to me directly, my email's super easy for people. It's coachcarnivorejoe@gmail.com. And yeah, basically, if anyone wants to reach out, even if they have questions, I'm actually, I probably, put my foot in my mouth a few times, but I always tell people, like, you have a question, just ask, I'll answer. And literally, I wake up every morning. If I go through 3 social medias, I average around 100 questions a day, right? Um, and I answer them all, right? And sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 days. And as long as they're not a novel, like if it's 1 or 2 questions, I'll answer them all. The thing I love about Facebook and Instagram is I can actually leave a voice message. So I'll literally, like yesterday, I think I left 44 voice messages to people asking me
Wow.
questions, right?
Amazing.
Um, and well, because I really want people to understand, with the popularity of our lifestyle now too, with like anything, when there's popularity, now there's monetization. When there's monetization, people kind of want to make it easier and simpler and sometimes sexy. And that's where we're getting a lot of deviation, right? Like I had a person the other day reach out to me. She goes, I'm so confused, like dirty carnivore, friendly carnivore, my way carnivore, keto carnivore, animal based carnivore, hyper carnivore. Like what's carnivore? Right. And she goes, can I have pickles? Can I have avocados? Honey carnivore? Can I have like, and I'm like, no, I get it. I go, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of do my lives. I do my video just so people understand,
That's
kind
beautiful.
of, you know, there is a difference, right? Like there's a dramatic difference actually from carnivore to animal based to keto. And it's more, I think the problem is inherently it's people's just, if it comes from an animal, it's carnivore, right? But what they're forgetting is that little snippet in there. If it's a meat, a fat that comes from an animal, it's carnivore, right?
Mm.
Like dairy. We have such this issue with dairy, and it's because, well, it comes from an animal. I go, yeah, but it's not derived from a meat and a fat, right? And the biggest issue with dairy is if you don't people don't think of the purpose of a cow and a calf and breast milk. Literally the lactose in the casein sends hunger signals so it eats more, so it grows more in its first year, right? Well, guess what? When we consume lots of it, it gives us the same signal,
Yeah.
right? And that's why we have to limit it. That's why ripened dairy is better than unripened dairy. And, because I get people that get really obtuse and really mad at me, right? Like when this is a great carnivore recipe and they're doing 1 egg and half a cup of cottage cheese. And I'm like, sorry, it's not carnivore. Cottage cheese is not carnivore. Sorry. A ripened cheese like Parmesan and lemon in it, absolutely. Right. But,
Yeah.
like, so yeah, so just, because I
It's a,
do want to inspire people to basically do it and, and understand the benefits and really get to that point.
I love it how you allow people to just and just tell us that you told us your email address, and I'll make sure that all your details will be
Yeah.
down in the show notes, but that you're just there. So I would say anybody who's watching this podcast, get on to Coach Carnivore Joe. I mean, he's answering your questions. Be a little bit patient, perhaps, but eventually he will get there. Joe, I
Yeah,
want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your knowledge, for your
yeah.
sharing, for your beautiful story as well, coming from a different angle than regular guests on the podcast. It was amazing having you here. And for anybody at home who's been listening to this, if this resonated with you, please hit the like button, leave us a comment, and subscribe to the channel as well so you can hear more of these stories. If you believe that Joe's story was inspirational for someone you know who's dear to you, please forward them the video as well. You never know what seed you're planting by just allowing this conversation to be heard. That's all there is for me today to say. Joe, once again, thank you so much for being on the show. And for everybody back home, welcome to your upgrade. Thank you for watching the Patrick Alexander podcast.